Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are taking another closer look at whodunit, pulling out the magnifying glass, busting out the pipe, maybe reading the Bible, because this week we are reviewing the third entry in the Knives Out trilogy from Rian Johnson, Wake Up Dead Man. As always, we're going to start things off with a quick icebreaker question before jumping into a spoiler-free review where we'll provide a verdict on the film, and then we'll close things out with an in-depth spoiler discussion. And my friends, as with all of the Benoit Blanc adventures starring Daniel Craig, there are so many layers to peel back, much like an onion, you could say. But before we begin to pull back the layers of that onion, I want to welcome back my co-host. He's an award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker. My right-hand man. He is the Benoit Blanc to my. I guess I'm the plus one in all of the adventures. He's the real Benoit Blanc here. His name is Laron Chapman. Laron, welcome back.
Man, I don't know if I could do that Daniel Craig accent, but he does it very well because that is not how he talks in real life. So it's pretty great. Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Thank you. I have an important question for you, Laron, as it relates to Daniel Craig in this movie.
Yes.
What do we think of the various wardrobe styles of Benoit Blanc, because they're different in every movie?
I think it was established in the second one that he's a family member of the queer community, so it is interesting to see his very fashionable sense of style. And I do think that Daniel Craig fits this role way too well, is what I'll say. And I do feel like in this one in particular, he's really relaxed into this role. Into it almost feels like a second he can play this character in his sleep now. So we love that about that. And I think when we saw the first one, Knives Out, we were like, hey, we could take 10 more movies with this character. And it looks like at this rate, we might actually get those. So
get 10 more. Yeah. And it's honestly been the perfect role for Daniel Craig to transition away from Bond into another sort of like a well-established franchise role that's radically different, but also sort of still plays to his strengths, which is...
This is original, right? This isn't based on anything.
No, completely original. There's a lot of... Rian Johnson was inspired by a lot of other works, but this is not based on any other material. This is original Rian Johnson.
That's pretty radical. That's pretty cool. You know, like, I mean, in terms of, originality, like, because these definitely feel like they were maybe based on some like old novels or something like that. But I guess Agatha Christie is a huge inspiration, but to create your own original, intricate plotting kind of storytelling is pretty great. But that just shows you how good of a writer Rian Johnson is.
Rian Johnson, yeah. So much more on that in a moment.
Yes.
I mostly was thinking about Daniel Craig, how he had longer hair in this one, shorter hair in the previous one. And then, his wardrobe choices always are really... keep me on my toes. So, whenever we inevitably get the fourth, whatever the Benoit Blanc adventure is called, I can't wait to see what he'll be wearing next.
Yes.
Now, listeners, before we get into all of the things, the wardrobe choices, the acting, the mystery, the suspense, the twists, I want to remind you, if you enjoy this conversation, you can follow the Cinematic Schematic wherever your podcasts are found. You can follow the Cinematropolis on YouTube because we are currently in an experimental phase with YouTube video content. So if you want to see our beautiful faces, you can see that Laron is actually Dr. Laron Chapman right now, based on where he's sitting. That is my new belief. His background says so. You can see that on the YouTubes. Yes, look at all those fancy pieces of paper. Dr. Laron Chapman, PhD. Yes.
Sir. I'm uniquely qualified for this, yes.
Yes, his whole life. So follow us on all those places and give us a rating and review so we can get discovered by more listeners like you. Now, Laron, let's jump into our icebreaker question here. I think when we did Glass Onion, I had to go back and look at what we talked about. And we pitched our own whodunit stories. And I thought, let's go a different direction with this one. And I don't know, we talked about this on our last episode. We've been living in sort of an IP state of Hollywood filmmaking really the last 25 to 30 years to a certain extent, but especially the last 10 to 15. And I say, if we're going to be stuck in the IP world, might as well come up with some really novel ways to tell a story within that framework. So my question for you, to break the ice today, is what major film franchise deserves a whodunit treatment? And when I say whodunit, what I mean is this is the type of mystery story where someone is murdered And then you have either a main character or a pair of characters who were on the case to figure out who did it and why. So, Laron Chapman, what do you got for me? And you can't say Scream; those are all already who done.
That's what I struggled with this one like very hard because I mean most of the movies that I like that are whodunits already have that framing device like built in baked into the story. But what I will say is I went a different route with this question. I'm kind of deviating here. I really wanted something I want to see is a Christopher Nolan whodunit mystery.
Yes.
Because I think when I was thinking of directors like Rian Johnson, who do I know that writes really intricate storytelling, very complex, layered, and I thought, well, most of Nolan's movies are a puzzle piece in and of themselves, even if they're not whodunits necessarily. There's kind of a suspense around how the pieces of his story are going to come together to make that whole. And so I would really like to pitch that Christopher Nolan is definitely someone who should make a whodunit film, a murder mystery. I think that it would probably look something like The Departed with him, I think, in that regard, if we're going to go like the prestige route. But I definitely think that he would be like the ideal person to direct something like that.
Obviously the murdered person would be a dead wife. I mean, because that's just how.
Well,
yeah,
he hates women, so
he loves women. He loves fawning over how they're not with him anymore.
Absolutely, yeah.
What he says.
It's very bitter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the Prestige is not a whodunit for sure. That's probably the closest we get into sort of like the mystery at the center of the story that he's sort of unraveling. And I would love, like, here's the thing: Christopher Nolan has said, I have proven that I can make big, expensive movies successful, and it provides me the opportunity to tell stories on the biggest scale possible, and I intend to do so as long as I can, because I do not believe I will be able to do so forever. I respect this. I also can't wait for him to one day go back to a smaller film,
like a Memento
so like he's really good at the twisty puzzle-like stories, and I do think you're right. That does give him sort of a unique qualification to do a traditional whodunit in his own way. So Christopher Nolan, I know you're listening. Yes. Think about that. After you make another $2 billion with the Odyssey, think about just taking a little like breather between that.
But I struggled to find an actual franchise though to apply that to. So I'm very curious to know like what you came up with, because like I said, most of mine already are things like The Thing or something like that, or like you said, Scream.
Well, I listen. I think I would say Star Wars, but they kind of sort of did that in episode 2 already. Not very well, unfortunately, I will say. But it did lead to some pretty cool political shenanigans. If you follow that story, I'm talking, of course, about how Obi-Wan hunted Jango Fett and all that good stuff. I think I want to see a story in the Alien franchise about who let the infected in. You have a room full of people that trapped. The xenomorph is somewhere amidst in the raptors, crawling around, probably face huggers crawling around. So you've got that added pressure of knowing that you could die or get attacked at any moment. Meanwhile, you know that there's someone in the room who has let the beast out. And it's up to the Detective Ripley, probably not Sigourney Weaver, but maybe like, I don't know, some grand niece clones, brother, thing, can be the one trying to suss it out. I'd throw that one out there. I also think that if you really wanted to go crazy with it, you could do a Terminator one where it's like, which one of us is the Terminator?
Yeah.
And how far you could push that. So there's been an important politician who's died, and you know that Skynet has infiltrated the White House. Okay, who in the White House is the killer robot?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's probably.
Of course, they all have to be big movie stars. That's the thing. It's very key to these stories that all of the suspects are like huge movie stars.
Absolutely. No. I mean, the Terminator one especially. I think the Alien one. See, I struggle with it because I almost did Alien, and I was thinking like, well, once it's inside them, they come out pretty quickly. So it's like they don't stay they don't stay that way for long. But yeah. So but the idea of that they're the person that actually brought it into the fold is a
It's
lot.
like who brought it in? Yeah,
Who
right,
did
right.
who did this with intention? Yeah, is a
And
lot
who's
more.
next is probably another question, because then there's an added boil. There's that pressure of like, oh gosh, I could be face hug next. So
Yes.
I don't know how that. I sit down and really hash out the beats of it, but I think it could be fun.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, what is a whodunit that you would like to see made from based on another franchise? You can let us know by heading to send us an email at the cinematropolis@gmail.com, or hitting us up on social media, Instagram. We're really trying to pump up the Instagram these days, so we can get some more video stuff up. So I hope you can see it there, the Cinetrop. But yeah, let us know your thoughts. Well, Laron, before we get to the review, I think it's worth doing a quick refresher on how we felt about the previous two Knives Out films. We did do an in-depth review discussion of Glass Onion back in 2022 when that came out, and I seem to recall at the time we were all very positive. So walk me through, like, what is your overall take on the Knives Out film so far?
Well, like we kind of talked about a little off script here before. Like, I'm just surprised that these are original stories, like, because they do feel like there could be like an old novel that they're all, that we're just adapting a bunch of books here. But the fact that he's managed to create an original character, an original detective, and these original, like mystery, like the murder plot mysteries, is very impressive, because of how intricate they are and how much they hold up and how much you are involved in that aspect of it. I think what I love about both of these movies is you don't get to be a passive viewer with these. Like, you can't just put these on autopilot. You definitely have to participate in it. So there's that participatory aspect of it, where you like the characters are trying to unfold these things. I think the first one is a blast, and like a great, like, kind of a lot of casting against type, if you will. Like, I mean, like Chris
Evans, yeah.
Chris Evans, like playing an asshole when he's like the most charming person, one of the most charming celebrities, and he's Captain America. You know what I mean? Like, he always turns it on to be this whiny kind of, like, I don't know, just a kind of a terrible son, if you will. And then I think, but what I like about both of these movies, that I associate them all with sequels. I mean, with seasons. Like I feel like that first one's very autumn. Knives Out mystery. Is the sequel is very, Glass Onion is very much like summer. So they both have different vibes to them, but it's all about casting, and I think in this regard, I think the chemistry between these actors is what sells them a lot too. Because you're seeing these big stars playing, like, hamming it up and having a blast. But yeah, they're fun, and I'm a whodunit person. Like, one of my favorite franchises is Scream, and they're all whodunits. So I guess it all goes back to Scooby-Doo, guys. That's all I got to say.
It's all about Scooby-Doo.
It all goes back to Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I know.
There's a line in here. He says that he's Scooby-Dooby-Doo. He does that.
I'm totally with you, though. I mean, I think the thing I like about both of these movies, or the first two movies, is they're telling whodunits within a contemporary framework. They're sort of touching on ideas and what's pressing at the time, is sort of like against the backdrop. So the first film is about sort of the toxicity of inherited wealth and how that can sort of turn a family not only against each other, but against others who seek to love and support the family over money. The second one, and I think that one, it feels like just more classic, traditional murder mystery,
Yeah.
Whereas you get Glass Onion, which is a huge gear shift from Knives Out. It is a big, rip-roaring, loud send-off of billionaires, and influencer culture and big money, and sort of like how vapid all of those things are, really, in the face of reason and science and hard detective work. And sort of even sort of busting the myth of, again, tech billionaires, like the disruptors, as like a net positive for the world. Like, these are things that are very topical, top of mind in our world today. And especially those first two are related, because they both tie into money being sort of the source of, I think, a lot of the ego and the backstabbing. We'll talk about more Wake Up Dead Man. This third one, I think, is shifting things. It's focusing on different things, which I think was really exciting for me to see as well. But I think Glass Onion was probably the one I had the most fun watching. but I also feel like it has the least, like it's pretty clear what it's about on the label.
Yeah.
Whereas Knives Out, I feel like there was a little more to unpack and chew on, and we'll talk about Wake Up Dead Man here in a moment. But each one of these is different. Each one of them has a different cast doing a different thing. They have different goals, and even the way they're delivering their ideas are actually.
And they all are dealing with like power structures in different
Mhm.
ways. And I think, yeah, it's very interesting as he'll assemble a group of people who, for the most part, in all these movies are always like shady characters. There's something wrong with each one of them, and there's normally like one person who's purely good in each one of them. And the first one will be Ana de Armas, and Wake Up Dead Man, it'll be
Josh
potentially
O'Connor.
potentially Josh O'Connor, like, so there, like there's like there's an interesting like duality, or like way that we intersect with all these different cast of characters who have very, very different motives and may or may not be good, so.
I mean, and you just get to see some of the, like you said, you already said the best actors. I'm thinking that first movie you have Michael Shannon, isn't there? Jamie Lee Curtis, and then the second one, I mean, uh,
Edward Norton,
Janelle Monáe, Dave Bautista, like all of these
Yeah.
actors, just really, like you said, going ham. It's a great time at the movies, I will say.
Yeah.
And I should ask, both of us had the privilege of seeing Wake Up Dead Man in the theater. Which was a huge plus. Again, this film was playing for 1 week only around Thanksgiving. So by the time you're listening to this is no longer in theaters. It's going to be hitting Netflix this Friday.
Yeah, you can watch it at home by now, I'm sure.
Probably, yeah. I think the movie's going to release on Netflix December 12th, so a couple days after this review publishes. So if you're catching this late, you should check it out. It's probably on Netflix already. So yeah. So Laron, with that said, we generally are pretty positive on the Knives Out franchise. I personally am a big Rian Johnson stan. Come at me, Last Jedi haters. I know you're there. You're still there. I've been following him since Brick and Brothers Blooms, and I'm not going anywhere. And I just don't think Rian Johnson misses, or at least not yet. Does he miss with Wake Up Dead Man? Let's find out.
You're the only one on stage with the Monsignor at the time of his killing. You're the only one at that church who hated his guts.
The spirit really moved him today, huh?
So tell me, what the hell happened?
Everyone thinks I did it. I didn't do it.
This goes way beyond normal police work. This is something even I have not experienced. A perfectly impossible crime.
This case is solvable, right?
I'm incapable of not solving a crime. Oh, you'll see. It's fun.
So according to the internet, Wake Up Dead Man is described as Detective Benoit Blanc is called to investigate a murder at a small town church with a dark history, a case he takes on with a skeptical priest. A few fun facts about Wake Up Dead Man. Again, this is the third Knives Out movie from writer-director Rian Johnson, and the second one that is distributed by Netflix. The first one was a full theatrical, I believe, was it Lionsgate? I believe someone else, but he got a full theatrical run. These Glass Onion, Wake Up Dead Man, both Netflix films. Wake Up Dead Man held its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival in September before having that 1 week only theatrical run on starting November 26th. And again, it'll be releasing on Friday, December 12th. This film sees the return of Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc and features another all-star cast of suspects, including Josh O'Connor, Glenn Close, Josh Brolin, Mila Kunis, Jimmy Renner, Kerry Washington, Andrew Scott, Kaylee Spaney, Dale McCormick, and man, good to see him again, Thomas Hayden Church. We were talking about the Laron, you were talking about, hey, these feel like they were adapted from pre-existing source material. Well, they aren't. They are original, but they are drawing heavily. Rian Johnson noted the most important influences on this particular film are Edgar Allan Poe and John Dixon Carr, as well as some elements from Agatha Christie's novel, and then there were none. All that said, Laron Chapman, what did you think of Wake Up Dead Man?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised by how introspective this one was, how much more philosophical this one was. It has a lot to say about very timely subjects that were in terms of like the intersection between one's faith and science, and it felt like this was the most the one that has the most to say about larger things outside of just that people with a lot of money, bad, like, or that sort of, it has a lot more thoughtful things to mine through this time around. My one kind of criticism of this one that I think is more so just a product of what I've expected from coming from the other two is the handle of the supporting cast in this one felt a little less emphasized. Like, these characters don't pop as much, but I think that's in service of the Josh O'Connor character taking kind of front and center here, because even Benoit Blanc in this story, doesn't come in until very late in the story. It's almost, I forgot he was in the movie for a minute, which is a good message towards Josh O'Connor, because I think he was really carrying the story very well. But something that I loved about the first two was just how dynamic all of the casts were integrated into the story. And I felt like this one, a lot of them, are kind of one note, with exception. There are exceptions amongst that. I think there's some standouts amongst them, but I do think like he had less of a handle on the other supporting cast members in this than he did in the other two. And this is obviously a lot darker than the other ones as well. So if that's not really your vibe, then it definitely has kind of a chillier, almost gothic tone to it, which I really loved about it. So this is different in like, especially in how he's getting his message across with this one. There seems to be a lot on his mind with this one. Whereas the other ones can be kind of flighty and just kind of fun. This one actually is like trying to say something important. And I think that to me makes it more substantive than the other two.
I think it's not only that it's trying to say something that's important, it's that it's asking questions that it doesn't necessarily have the answers to, but wants to leave them with the audience in a pointed way, right? At least that was for me. That was my take. Like, he's got a lot on his mind, and there are some things that are very concrete. We'll get into that throughout spoilers, but there's also, one thing we're going to talk about in spoilers, the idea of the reveal versus revelation. Reveal being, I'm giving you the answers. Revelation being, I want to challenge the way you're looking at this problem inherently and think about what that means in a broader context. The latter of which is open-ended, typically, at least for my money. And I think that for me, the real power of Wake Up Dead Man, the sort of the thing it has going that I don't think the other two have is it's, the other two is pretty clear what I'm supposed to think. Okay, money bad. You said it, money bad. People with money bad. Both at an institutional level and on an individual level, especially like in Glass Onion. This one's saying, hey, there's faith, there's science, there's reason, there's skepticism. Where does that all fit together to provide a truth? And the movie sort of is exploring that. And I don't know that it always comes to a definitive answer on how those things work in tandem with or against each other to create a truth that we can all accept. That was one of the things I found the most compelling. And you said there's a lot on his mind about those topics, but it's also still timely in a different way. Instead of it being about money, we're talking about the place of religion in 2025. Cult of personality. What attracts people to follow or fall into a cult of personality? Where in this case, we're talking about a specific minister, someone who's very charismatic and draws people to them, but also sort of emotionally abuses them into sort of becoming his followers, which ties into this other thing about like it explores righteousness and what that can do to poison a community, to turn people against each other. And again, I think some of these things he's got a very clear point of view on, and other things I think he wants us to all be thinking about when the credits roll. I'll talk a little bit more about how he goes about doing that. But overall, I thought this was great. Didn't want, like you said, I think you said earlier, this third entry, Daniel Craig has really settled into the role more. He's more comfortable than he's been. He's having a blast, but he's not being nearly as like big and showy as he was saying like Glass Onion, for example. And I think that's the film's strength. I also appreciate Glass Onion being this big bombastic. So you could, felt like 3 times the budget. It was a much bigger movie, both in terms of the performances, the mystery. This one, the scope is so much smaller and quieter. There's a lot of moments to sit and just think, which I appreciated. So I think overall, on first glance, this is probably my favorite of the 3. That said, I the characterization, I didn't think it was a big, I do think Monsignor, the character played by Josh Brolin, gets a lot of airtime, which takes away from the airtime some of the other supporting cast gets.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Josh O'Connor specifically getting quite a lot more to do than the others. My biggest issue is more with the pacing. I do feel like the first act setup I thought was awesome. And I won't reveal what the framing device is, but it is a really interesting framing device, which, to your point, Laron, I kind of got so sucked up into that story that I forgot that I was still in a different story,
Mm-hmm.
And I also didn't know how this story was going to ultimately tie into the story that the mystery that we were watching, So that was super cool. I thought the setup was brilliant. The second act, I think, it expands almost too far to where I almost lost the thread about where am I supposed to be focusing my attention with these different cast members. There's things that feel like red herrings, that there's a lot of red herrings and misdirection that I feel like wasn't totally necessary to sort of still keep me in suspense while also delivering a tight story. And it really, I did check my watch a couple times. That said, I think the third act delivery, the way they go about sharing the information of who did it and why and all of that is brilliant stuff. It really
of the franchise, I think, for sure.
Easily. And I again think it's not like what he's done with the first two movies at all. And for that, I think it really sets it apart for me as the strongest entry so far for me personally. But how would you compare, if you were to kind of further elaborate, I mean, how would you compare Wake Up Dead Man to the other two?
Yeah, it has a much more muted pace to it. As you mentioned, like the other two are pretty snappy and very witty and back and forth. And this one is much more restrained, which works really well in certain elements, in certain aspects of the story. But overall, I agree with you. Like it does have a more stodginess to it, where it does feel like, okay, where it's not as clear, as you said, like where we're going, who we're supposed to be focusing on. And I think that, like when we get to the ultimate revelations, if you will, of the story, all of that time is rewarded. You know what I mean? Like, so so in the end, it's like kind of like my critique, if they played a different way, maybe that impact wouldn't have landed as strongly at the end, but definitely in the moment when you're there, like that middle section does feel a little less, focused, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it's an absorbing watch. And I do think like, from a vibe standpoint, like it's the darkest and the most, I think I mentioned introspective. It just has a lot on its mind.
It's contemplative. It's very contemplative
about what it's trying to say and how it's putting it out there, and how it wants you to engage with this material. Like it's very intentional in that regard. And I found that interesting because the other ones, like you said, are pretty straightforward in their messaging and what it's trying to say. And this one is definitely like, it's not entirely sure, but it's asking questions that are very relevant to a lot of people. And so I do think that for the more thoughtful viewer, this will be a really rewarding watch, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your point, I've only seen it the one time. I am very eager to see it again because I think I will probably feel differently about Act 2, knowing how it all comes together.
Yeah, exactly.
I also say of the three, it's the one I'm adamant I'm going to be rewatching before I vote for my FYC Oklahoma Film Critics Circle, because I think there's a lot of things that I got caught up on that I'm curious to see how that lands for me ultimately upon a rewatch. And again, with the other two, those were very rewatchable for a different reason, because there's a little bit, they're funny, they're kind of crowd pleasing in a certain way. This one is the one I'm like, no, I want to rewatch it so I can really kind of chew and sit with the ideas a little more.
Sure. I kind of look at this as like if you're a Harry Potter person, it's like this is the Prisoner of Azkaban version of it. Like, like the first two, like the sense of discovery, and then it's like it's fun and the world building and who these people are and all this stuff like that. But this one's like okay, we're getting deeper here. We're thinking through some things a little bit more, and that's refreshing. To have your third entry actually have something to say, and not just follow the formula again. You know what I mean? Like, because it breaks its own formula here, in terms of who the narrator is, who we're supposed to be focusing on, and how how certain information is received.
Well, and it goes out of, and this might be a point that annoys certain people. It doesn't annoy me. I really like it, but it knows what you're expecting as the audience. You're like, oh, okay, well, Benoit Blanc's going to come in here and do this, this, and this, and the movie even calls out like, oh no, this is what you think. This is what you were expecting to happen. We're not going to do that. And I appreciated that.
It was surprising. It was genuinely surprising. I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna. And the fact that it was able to surprise me before we ever even get to the ultimate mystery that we're supposed to be trying to solve here is, a testament to him having that element of surprise as a writer, being able to be ahead of audience expectations, so.
I saw a quote when I was putting together the discussion notes for this one. I didn't include it. Maybe I should have, but it was Rian Johnson on the press tour for Glass Onion was saying, he said something to the effect, this is massive a paraphrase, but he said something to the effect of, a lot of people will accuse Agatha Christie for, going back to the well and doing the same formulas over and over again. But the real people who have read all of her stuff inside and out know that is not true. She's using the same tools to tell a different kind of story. And I think that he is similarly doing a thing like that with these movies. Because again, no one of these movies is alike. They're all different, doing different things and operating in different ways. But overall, again,
and they're commenting on different things too.
I will say I was concerned. Rian Johnson has blown up quite a bit. Knives Out was a big win for him, and then they had Glass Onion, and then we get the Peacock series, Poker Face. I was a little worried that his shtick might be a little more well worn, and I was very happy to report that again. I think he's approaching things a lot more subtly with this one than he has in the last couple. So that's a big win. Well, how would you rank the movies, Laron?
Man, okay, so I think I hate to say this is this is a criticism, but it's not a criticism, it's more an observation. This is the least fun one of the three, but I think it's the best one of the three in terms of, like what it's saying, how it's structured, and ultimately like the kind of questions that it leaves you with, and the kind of like if you're thinking about a Knives Out movie afterwards, then you've done a good job. But the other ones, I had a good time. I'm thinking of performances or individual scenes, but here I'm thinking about what it's saying, and I think that's important, especially with entertainment. You know what I mean? If it asks those important questions. So I think this is the best one, objectively the best one. Although I don't think it's as snappy or as fun as the other two, so it's kind of like so I'm going to place it in the second place right now, and say that my favorite one still is the original. It is the original, because it does establish the mechanics of this, and this establishes this character, so I think that one, on a plotting aspect of it, is the most elaborate and interesting. But the second one, I'll put this one number 2. And then I think Glass Onion is a blast. It's kind of a candy coated confection though. So I'll put it like it's the least, it has the least to say, but it's also probably the one I'm going to put on most often, so 1, 3, 1, 3, 2.
1, 3, 2. I'm gonna go 3, 1, 2. For all the reasons you say. There is something that's funny. Like I do think Glass Onion in a lot of ways is the easiest one to turn on, just because of how crowd pleasing and loud and funny and it is. But I think my thing about that one is the things it's about. It's not subtle in any way. Like what he's literally sticking his he's like sticking his thumb in the face of like billionaires and wagging his finger a lot, and that probably drives some people crazy. I think it's a ton of fun, but there's not really a lot of subtlety or nuance or subtext there. Whereas I think we're getting a lot of that, which is what I value in Wake Up Dead Man. So 3, 1, 2. As of right now, we'll see. I do need to rewatch it again when it hits Netflix.
Yeah, I need to rewatch this one before I cement that. But I think my initial thought is this is how I feel right now. But I do think that the third one has the potential to rise in resonance with me, as the years go on, because I'm still kind of thinking about what they did with this one, because I wholly didn't expect that to be something I'm leaving with, if you will, wrestling with certain ideas. But yes.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring it home before we get into spoilers. There's a lot to talk about there. So, what letter grade would you give Wake Up Dead Man, Laron?
I'd give this a B plus. I think it's really solid. I don't necessarily think it's perfect, but I do think it's very thoughtful, and it has a lot of there's a lot of substance with the entertainment here, and I'm appreciative that he put that in this kind of movie, because it's not exactly where you would think to find it, so it's definitely something I think that will resonate a lot with people. And yeah, so I think it's a very strong entry into an already very strong franchise. So
yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm gonna go a smidge higher touch. I'm gonna go with an A minus. Again, I think I'll need to rewatch it to cement that, but I think the thing I love about it is it really is very thought provoking while also emotional, while also it's actually, even to the characters that don't deserve it, it is very empathetic to all of the characters, even the ones that don't deserve it. And I think that's what really, I think, puts that up a notch for me. Is it, especially a movie involving the church, it could have come across like a religion bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is not at all what it's doing. And I think it's really exploring the nuance of, what these institutions and what these philosophies mean in our current day situation, and how do we meaningfully apply those to the world we're living in today, despite the internet, despite the politics. Like, what is this really doing for us? Anyway, all of that to say, I think this is an A minus, and it delivers something that I think great films do, which is that revelation that we'll talk about. A few other recommendations here. So what other would it be, a movie, TV show, novel, music, video game? What other things would you recommend alongside people who like Wake Up Dead Man, Laron?
Well, you already said it once. I was actually gonna recommend just the Poker Face series, because I actually love both seasons of those, and yes. I'm perpetually just impressed by the fact that he can create an intricate story and still make it interesting, have a new character, have a new setting, have a new thing, and it still feels fresh and fun every single time. And I'm still surprised every single time. I'm like, okay, so there's something,
this many episodes where it feels like it's doing a different thing,
thing, using, as you mentioned, and using the same framing device, but saying something different with each episode. And also it makes me wonder if he's this good at plotting this kind of thing. He's definitely someone that can get away with murder, or probably has, and we just don't know. Don't know about it. Totally. He's so charming and sweet. He's so charming and so sweet, but he's definitely he's gotten out of a few things without telling people about it. So
and now Rian Johnson, put him on the watch list. No,
yes, put him on the watch list. He knows where those Epstein files are.
Yeah, he knows where they're all at. Yeah. So Laron, side tangent. I want to take us to a point. Did you hear the news that Poker Face got canceled at Peacock recently?
I did.
And then now they are shopping. Him and Natasha Lyonne are now shopping around to other networks, but instead with Peter Dinklage as the main character.
I did hear this.
What do you think about this?
I mean, I love Peter Dinklage, so I'm not gonna take any jobs away from that man. But I will say that I think part of what works so beautifully about that show is Natasha Lyonne, because she's such a the perfect casting for this particular character. And now I feel like I'd have to see what they do with it and what his approach is to it, because I think what it is right now I'm just so married to what's been established now,
right,
that to see a whole new thing with a new character, I'm sure the plotting and the all of that will still be interesting. I'm just, I'm married to the idea of her being the face of this, so removing that makes me a little sad, but also, like, if they're gonna pivot, I guess that's one way to do it.
People just love that guy. Pretty much everything. Yeah, I don't know. Just, it was a very bizarre announcement, because I seem to recall Poker Face performing pretty well from a ratings perspective. I know it's also got to be quite expensive, especially knowing the guest stars they bring on. But
it's gotten a couple Emmy nominations, so I mean, it's not. Yeah, I thought it was really well received, so I'm kind of surprised by that too. Yeah.
But hopefully we get more, whether that's with Peter Dinklage or not. I'm very curious. I'm going to go a slightly different direction. I do think you should check out Poker Face, now streaming on Peacock. There's 2 seasons. I mean, if you love all of the movie stars in this show, wait until you see the guest lineup on that show. I'm going to go, listen, listeners at this point are tired of hearing me say that you should go watch Silence, a movie about Revelation and what it means to recontextualize your belief system in a different framework and meaning and context and culture. But go see Silence, Martin Scorsese's film. Deeply underrated, wildly underseen. It is for me, it is in my Letterboxd top 4, and I think it is frankly a movie people of any faith, but especially like Western Christian Catholic faith, should all watch and just kind of think about what does it mean to be a follower of Christ in a culture that is so deeply misaligned with that belief system.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to reveal about how we think about Christianity today. I'm also going to go with Dogma, which, by the way, is finally getting a 4K release. I think by the time you're listening to this, it should be out now. So check that one out. After years and years and decades of not being available on physical media, didn't get a Blu-ray release at all. It is finally back with the people. So check out Dogma. And again, another thing listeners are probably tired of me talking about in the history of the show as it relates to faith. Watch Lost, Season 2, Episode 1, Man of Science, Man of Faith. Great discussion there. Great didactic conversation about some more topics this movie's exploring.
I appreciate your commitment to Lost. I really do. There are certain things that are synonymous. If I had to list 5 things on your grave, Lost would be 1 or 2 on that list. So
yeah, I did get married on the same I only shot the show.
So there you go.
Yeah,
there you go. I'll throw one out there just quickly because First Reformed is another one that I think in terms of, I didn't know we were going deep with our recommendations. You said when you started with Silence, I'm like, oh man, well if we're going to go that route in terms of movies that question the institution of religion and one's personal devoutness to it, I think that First Reform is another one where you have someone who's truly, truly devout to the word, understands it, but also sees how the world and the way people operate with that institution, how those things contradict one another quite often. And it forces you in that regard to really test your faith in that regard. And I think that's a really underseen watch that I think
Absolutely.
a lot more people should see. It's definitely a heavy watch. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not it's bleak at times or most times, but it's definitely very, very worth your time.
First Reformed also got to be, I mean, I've made a list of my top movies I've ever seen, but that's easily in my top 25 of all time.
Yeah.
And it's probably higher. I just haven't done the ranking, but it's a really powerful movie about faith. So highly recommend. Ethan Hawke was robbed. He should have won the Oscar for that movie. Either there. Green Book. Well, Lie Dogs Lie. Okay. All right. If you don't want to be spoiled on Wake Up Dead Man, go ahead and tune out now.
With all the pieces on the table, this crime appears impossible.
I think the underlying themes or ideas where the film was exploring, science, faith, cons, and the cult of personality. So we've talked about how Knives Out explored the corrupting power of inherited wealth. Glass Onion explores the contradictions and facade of tech billionaires and how they game the system to exploit others. Wake Up Dead Man takes Block into an entirely different type of story, one that pairs his own cynicism, which we've seen why he's cynical in previous movies because people are awful, and applying that and pairs that alongside an organized religion, through the character of Josh O'Connor's Reverend Judd Duplicity. So this is a totally different Benoit Blanc story, and I think it really works for me because, there's a whole scene when Benoit Blanc shows up. By the way, it's Josh O'Connor just crying out for God to show him a sign in the church, and then the doors open with the light, and it's Benoit Blanc. And then, firstly, just A+ delivery. Yeah. Just the appearance was great. And then you get Benoit Blanc go on and get on a whole monologue about why the church is stupid and silly, and so you get very clear points of view out the gate.
Yes. By the way, I'm investigating you. Wait, what? Exactly.
So Laron, what did you think about how the film approached sort of the power of faith against scientific evidence and investigation and skepticism?
I was very surprised by this in a very refreshing way because I really love the tension that it creates between those two ideas or those two ideologies, and how they occasionally intercept, and how they occasionally, and more often than not, they contradict. But how in this movie they're bringing validity to both concepts, as well as revealing all the holes in either side of those that will really never satisfy either group. And I think that is the age-old question that we as humans on this earth have been wrestling with. Is there are aspects of this that make sense, and there are aspects of this that don't make sense. And then you have science that explains so much of those things, but not everything. So there's that weird tension between like how much how much can we put our faith in certain things, and how much should we rely on what's in front of us that can be proven demonstratively. And that's an interesting question that this movie does not answer, but does present in a very meaningful way to create a discourse around the intersectionality between faith and science. I found that very, very compelling as a storytelling device, and it made all these characters very rich in in that regard. So I think I really enjoyed that inclusion into the story.
Yeah, and again, I think the thing I like about it is it makes great cases for both sides, because obviously your protagonist Benoit Blanc, your main series protagonist, is cynical. He's not a man of faith. He thinks it's all a con, a ruse. But you have your other lead in the movie, is Josh O'Connor's the Reverend, who is struggling. He has been burned. He is cynical about the people, specifically the Reverend Monsieur, played by Josh Brolin, but he also still believes in the calling of sort of bringing love and compassion and community to these disparate groups of people who feel lost and alone in the world they're living in. And so the way that you're able to see the important role that the Reverend plays in the larger community, paired up against the case, which is one where there's resurrections, there is a murder that seems completely unsolvable. There's ghosts. There are these things that Benoit Blanc is saying, I think we need to look more closely at this. Meanwhile, you have Josh O'Connor, who's saying, I need to be here for these people. I need to love these people because they deserve to be loved. I mean, there's a whole, we'll kind of get into it, when we talk about the power of revelation versus like sort of the reveal, but like it's, this idea of sometimes we get so hung up on trying to problem solve or solve mysteries that we forget the reason we're trying to do that, which is to provide a vital sort of spiritual fulfillment to people in their community. Anyway, so you see how these things are both working in their own lane. I think, as you so eloquently put it, there is occasionally overlap, and sometimes the things people believe aren't necessarily in those communities and those groups aren't necessarily true, or at least not what they think it is. But that does not mean that their inherent faith is an evil or dumb thing either. So it kind of goes, there's that tension that we kind of explore throughout the movie.
Yeah, it plays both sides and it respects both sides, and that's honorable. And that's not something you would expect from something like this, And so I appreciate that he honors what's real to both sides of this coin, and I think that makes this a lot more interesting and not finger wavy, because it could be that whether you agree with the position that he takes or not, I think taking that, straddling the line between those two, creates a lot more interesting things to chew on as you're watching it. So yeah,
no, absolutely. It does not, like, again, of the three, it seems the least preachy, actually, whereas the other two, like we said, the reviews, like, it's very clear what the movie's talking about. And then this movie is clear what it's talking about, but it is not telling you, here's what you need to think, or making it obvious what you're supposed to think, as much as it's sort of like posing questions. I do think it is, I think, pretty pointed in criticism around how oftentimes there is an overlap between the people of faith who are just looking for a calling or a purpose, and the cult of personality that oftentimes takes hold in all sorts of organizations, whether that's corporate America, whether that is in churches, whether that's in government. The movie is entertainment, especially entertainment. How these oftentimes toxic, harmful people can build such a devoted base who will just follow their every will. So, I mean, I don't know, Ron, what did you think about how the film uses faith as a vehicle to explore that cult of personality that often draws people to organized religion?
It rings very, very true for me because I often say this, and that I am a person of faith, and that often surprises people that meet me, because I operate in circles that generally like, how could you still be, this? And I think what it is I've always divorced my personal faith away from, as far away from the institutionalized aspect of it as I can, because that's where I find that what I hold or personally believe to be true, has gotten bastardized in so many ways, and the wrong, we'll call them bad actors, have co-opted that, used that, leveraged that, used it to demonize other people. And then when they're like, well, so you believe what these people like? Well, no, I don't believe what those people do or what they're saying. I think that they have contaminated that well, if you will, and are using something that you hold very true to yourself. And you know what I mean? And basically, again, like poison the well in that regard. And so I think that's something that, that I think is important to realize, that the people have their own agendas when they use these certain things. And as humans, we're flawed individuals. And so I don't have issues with the faith. I have issues with the people who have used it and leveraged it and weaponized it against people, especially vulnerable people. And so it's kind of like holding what's that? There's a line in First Reformed. It's like holding two contradictory things in your mind at the exact same time, where I am critical of religion, but I still am a person of faith, and I think that that's fine. I think that we, as individuals, we should be critical of things. We shouldn't I think blind absolute anything is scary. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes in the form of, as you say, like somebody that we are idolizing, and we cannot see our own moral, kind of compass gets compromised whenever we blindly follow one thing, or one person. Because they might have their own agenda for that, and I think that that's something that is something we should be trepidatious about doing.
See, and I mean, in the case of the film, I mean, the Monsignor, played by Josh Brolin, is, it's interesting. He's like, "This is my church. You're not going to take it away from me." It's all about him. So there's like a hint of narcissism, sort of feeling his agenda. He feels as if he was raised righteously, right? Whereas the sort of the story is his mom had been an entitled person who had lived in sin, whereas he sort of followed the path. So it gave him the right to run the church the way that he saw fit. It's not about what the Bible actually says or what the superiors in the church are saying. That's why Josh O'Connor is sent there in the first place, is to kind of keep an eye on him. It is, this guy likes power. He wields power through righteousness that he says he has because he's done the right things. But then we see that he leverages that authority and that entitlement that he has grown up with his whole life, that was sort of nurtured along by his grandfather, intentionally or not, and is using that as a weapon against people. He is the people who stay in the church. He uses it to make them angry, to feel even more vindicated in how they feel, turning them against the very community they live in. And then for anyone else who comes into the church, it scares them away. And the idea there being that if he cannot control them, he does not want them to be a part of the church anyway. Yeah. And then if they don't want to be a part of the church, they are the enemy, Yeah. So, which again, I think you really eloquently painted a picture about how, you've seen this play out in organized religion. Yes, in America, but I think you could say this globally. I mean, throughout human history, how religion is often co-opted by people, cult of personality leaders with agendas of their own. I don't think the Crusades happened because Jesus himself said, "Go invade that country." These are individuals who for one reason or another, whether it be the charisma, whether it be the political power and influence, whether it be sort of this like track record of righteousness. He's the most righteous person, so obviously we must listen to him. Wield their power to inflict harm on others. And in this case, we find out that it's also all a facade. He's all about being righteous, but the real thing is he just wants to cash the paycheck of he wants the family wealth so he can go live out his dream as some sort of like online influencer or something.
Right.
Kind of feed that ego even more.
And our inability as the people on the receiving end of that to be able to question or you know what I mean, or challenge any of that is super important here, because that's definitely something that, you know, if we have a celebrity, say, that we've idolized for so long, we have an emotional connection to them, whether they're a musician or they're an actor or whatever, and then they do something morally wrong, and they have there's no redeeming aspect of that, and we say to us and we defend them to the end of time because of whatever that relationship you have with them. Like, that's an example where it's like, it's really difficult. We're in we're in that transitional period right now where people are having to let go of things that they've always, you know what I mean, felt very strongly towards. And where you lie with that depends on the person, you know, and the thing.
Well, and the way that in this case, like the way the character, I mean, Josh O'Connor tries to have a private prayer group. And I don't even think he has an agenda with it. He just wants to get to know people, and he does not feel like he can do that with the Monsignor there because of he's made it very
influences there. Yeah.
But then the second they find out that he doesn't know about it, they're like, "Oh, I'm out!" Like they are afraid of this guy. Like this, they are they have been brought into the group, and he emotionally abuses them to the point of being afraid. He probably has dirt on all of them. And that's literally what he says at the end of the movie. He says, I am going to, on my way out, I'm going to ruin all of you because you're all terrible people. He's just a bully. He's a narcissist, you know, and he can't have what he wants. He wants to burn it all down. It's not about, the religion is the tool. It is not the belief system.
Absolutely.
You know? Anyway, I don't know. That was sort of kind of my read on the cult of personality. I do think the movie is pretty clear about that. Like the Monsignor, played by Josh Brolin, not a good dude. Clearly created toxicity not only within the church, within the community at large. How did you interpret where the film sort of left the audience with the truth behind the supernatural resurrection story?
There's a line, I think, where with Josh O'Connor, I think it's probably when Benoit Blanc walks in and is kind of talking about like, we're wearing costumes and this is basically Disney World, you know what I mean, in a different way. You know, we're playing roles, we're playing characters. And I think that the idea that it's all storytelling, like we're you know, it's like they've created this narrative and we all just play our parts in that role. I think that, you know, that there's something interesting about, I don't think it's saying that everything is made up, but it's saying that it really depends on who's telling the story. You know what I mean? Like it changes depending on who's telling the story. We reviewed Wicked recently. Whoever is sharing that information and pumping that out, like that's what the people start to follow. So it's important. It's important that we're very intentional, you know, whenever we're saying these things, we're not bringing our own stuff to it, as so many of these people that we idolize do, and use it for their own nefarious reasons, you know. And so I think it places things in an interesting, like it puts a big question mark on everything we believe, you know. Like, why do you believe it? Who told you to believe it? When does the first time you remember hearing this story? You know what I mean? Like, what was the setting when that happened? You know what I mean? Like, at what point did you challenge it at any point during that period? Or did you just follow along with it? You know, it's not to say it's untrue, but it's to say that, why do you believe what you believe? Do you believe it because you believe it, or because you don't think you have a choice, or you were told to?
Have you interrogated the why you believe it thing? You know, and it's interesting because, you know, Josh Brolin uses the story about his mother as like this cultural touch point in the church's history, with the missing cross has been taken down because of her.
Yeah.
And that's a symbol, as a reminder of people who have lived a wicked lifestyle, like, you know, again, which sort of like fosters his own narrative. But why do we believe his version of the story? What has given him the right? Because it's his mom?
Yeah.
Or
where does the credence come from? Where does the credibility come from?
Exactly.
You know?
And is there perhaps more to it than we
Did he
would
misinterpret it?
because he was a kid when he heard that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So I think that understanding who's telling the story and why is super important. I also think it leads, leads very nicely into the second topic I'm going to talk about, which is the power of, the reveal versus the revelation. Because especially when it comes to the resurrection story, Wake Up Dead Man takes a very different approach to dispersing the information about what happened to the audience. Instead of Benoit Blanc explaining everything to the audience, as he's done in the previous two films, in this movie and pokes fun at that, like, he's going to come in with his big moment. This film, Blanc instead leaves the truth in the hands of the murderer, original murderer, Glenn Close, Martha Delacroix, to confess her sins to the Reverend Judd Duplessis, played by Josh O'Connor, and by extension, the audience. And the reason that Blanc cites for his decision to do this way is revelation. They refer to the road to Damascus, which, for those of you who are not familiar with the biblical history there, the Saul was a person who persecuted Christians, and on the road to Damascus saw Christ, went blind, and when he had his sight back, he became Paul the Apostle and was a devout follower of Christ. Way more to it than that, but that's kind of the gist of the story. So within the context of Wake Up Dead Man, Josh O'Connor cites Damascus. He's like, I had a Damascus moment. I called this woman asking her for some very important evidence that would help us figure out who organized the burial. And he calls her, and she shares this news that's very real. She's like, "Oh, my mom is dying of cancer and or dementia. She's dying, and she's not in her right mind. And she said some harsh things to me, and I said harsh things back, and I feel terrible about that." And then you see Josh O'Connor, there's this whole cutaway. He's having a very lengthy conversation with her off screen. And when he comes back, he's like, "I think I'm done trying to solve this mystery. My role in this world is not to solve the mystery. It is to be there for the people who need it most." It was like a reminder of what his original calling was, why he went into the ministry to begin with. A lot of context and setup to say this movie, and Benoit Blanc has his own Damascus moment at the end, when he believes it is his chance to reveal the truth to everyone, but instead actually publicly tells everyone he doesn't have the answers, so that the person who has, sort of put on this game face about being the most righteous person, the most devout, can confess her sins. So long way of saying, a lot of setup there. Laron, how does this decision to reveal the details of the case via Delacroix's confession really ultimately change the meaning of the story we're watching?
It's interesting because like you said, it kind of shifts away from the idea that the story is about finding out who did this, and more so why and what their intentions were behind it. And because at this point, I think what's also very interesting is that with religion, it's like, I feel like the film has this idea that it's not that people who are religious are incapable, you know what I mean, of doing good or having an intention to do good or have the capacity, I guess I should say, to do good. It's what is the underlying reason for their motives, for their actions. And I think in this regard, it wasn't going to have the impact that he wanted it to have coming from himself. It had to come from her. It had to come from her methodology for why this whole thing was necessary, to do this. And so for that to actually land for everyone else, him being a non-believer himself wasn't going to have that same impact, if that makes sense. But, and I found that as a plot twist, if you could even call it that, you know what I mean? It's like you said, it is more of a revelation of something that we, it's a way of interpreting everything differently. And I found that very, very, very compelling, for this movie.
Yeah. I mean, like the kind of the outlook I have on this is, if Benoit Blanc is the one who rolls out the answers and tells everyone who did it, it's another case closed. It's clear as mud. But he instead has to choose. You even see growth with his character. He has to choose to have faith that Delacroix's intentions were not as malicious as they might seem.
Yeah.
He had to have faith in her ability to have a conscience,
Yeah.
to confess the truth of what she had done, which is a big character growth moment for him, but also for the audience. Like, maybe we should have faith in one another, rather than being judgmental or trying to be righteous ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think, something Blanca's saying is that, like, the person behind this is the one who you would label the most righteous. In every corner, she's the one who's been following the rules her whole life, sitting in the shadows, doing what was asked of her, doing what was asked of her by a leader she didn't like. And she ultimately comes to the conclusion herself, if I really believe this, I will have a conscience and will come clean because it is inherent to who I want to be. So I think the movie is encouraging us to have faith in one another, and also reveals the only reason she does that is because she is devoutly a believer in a faith larger than herself, which I think also sort of kind of places the power of the spirituality on the conscience. Anyway, these are not necessarily answers. These all might sound like a bunch of mad ramblings by Caleb here, but I'm just saying, like, the movie, it really does change the takeaway that I have. Is it possible that the people in my life who I sometimes dislike the most, I have not given them enough faith? Or have I become the righteous one by judging them too harshly, the same way they have judged me? You know what I mean? It's just asking those questions, and I'm not giving answers. But it's something to think about.
And I feel like Benoit Blanc himself, like you said, has changed himself. Like, he himself is through the earnestness and the purity of Josh O'Connor's character, like the faith, the way that he does truly embody what he's saying. You know what I mean? Like, because part of the reason why I think so many people leave religion is, like, normally the people or the players in them turn out to be phony or hypocritical in their own space. So it's like, I don't trust them because I've seen you do the opposite of what you're saying. You know what I mean? Like, so there's this degree of, like, why should I trust you in that regard? And so I think that in this moment, like, he's starting to see that there is goodness in even some of the most wicked people that were there, because their intentions were to do something good, even if it ultimately didn't pan out that way. I see what you were getting at, and therefore that reveals something to me that I had written off when I came in here. And I thought that was interesting, interesting. The whole third act is just brilliant. I just think it was so interesting the way that we're having a larger conversation in the context of this Agatha Christie style murder mystery.
You done it right, yeah.
But we're talking about some real, some real truths, some real deep truths, and
what's great too is Benoit Blanc at the end. He's still like, so when we come back, O'Connor's like, so you want to come to church? And he's like, no, I'm not coming to church. Like, he's not. And this is where it's like, it's not expecting him to convert because he had a moment of revelation or spiritual experience, or however you would want to describe it. But it does show growth in him, that he is willing to create a space where that can and should happen. For there to be sort of like
for
some
those
sort
that
of,
need it for the right reasons. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. But obviously you have Monsignor's son, who is there's a lot of bad actors still. And the movie is very critical of the bad actors. And I think that is the thing. The Delacroix is not a bad actor. She is a scorned, self-righteous person who has made some bad, selfish choices.
Who thinks she's doing good.
Who thinks she's doing good.
And that's also important. It's also, again, the intention. It's like, why did you go through the extraordinary lengths to do this? Because you think you are doing the righteousnof that you believe that, but but that's where it gets
different. Which is different than the Monsignor or most of the members of the church they're all bad, as you put it earlier. They're all bad actors. They are people they are trying to gain something out of going to this church for themselves.
They're exploiting it for their own gain, whereas you believe what you're saying is right, even though you're doing terrible things to accomplish that. Yeah.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Rian Johnson doesn't miss. I'll say it again. I'm sure all the Last Jedi haters are coming with pitchforks, but this was a great one. I'm very eager to watch it again. Laron, Chapman, anything else you want to add about Wake Up Dead before we wrap up today?
If you can see it in the theater, you probably can't. Definitely at least watch it at home. As you said, on December 12th. I think it's a really worthwhile entry in this, and we're very curious to know if he continues to go on with these stories, like where he goes next with this. Because as you said, we've dealt kind of with different power structures. And here we're dealing with a power that's kind of like something. It's different. Like religion is its own power that has been used and leveraged for different things, but it's also manufactured to a certain degree. But faith in and of itself is something you can't manufacture, but you can give people the illusion of that, in these power structures. So I think that's an interesting way to, like, we're mining and we're skewering something that is very personal to each individual person. So very interesting for a Knives Out mystery. So
surprisingly so. Again, I never expected these. I've liked the other two. I didn't ever expect one that kind of hits at the core of things. And these are things that are important to me too, as a person who grew up as a person of faith. I think there's just a lot to chew on, and hopefully people can walk away. But I should also say, while these are dealing with big, weighty topics, this is still fun.
This is still a fun movie. Yeah,
it's still a fun time.
It's still fun. It's still entertaining. The cast
jokes,
great.
Lots of fun, laughing.
Josh O'Connor, great comedic performance here. Also, like Pedro Pascal and Josh Brolin are all fighting for like a year of them. It's like, so I think Pedro probably has more notches on his belt, but Josh O'Connor
there's more credits, but
but I think Josh O'Connor is probably the one on a roll here with the ones that everyone,
the critical
hits. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So
all right. Well, so much more to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. That is it for our review of Wake Up Dead Man. Laron, thanks for being willing to dive deep into, again, surprisingly, an Agatha Christie style whodunit. Where can people follow you and all the work you're doing online until our next episode?
They can follow me at cinematropolis.com. They can also follow me on Letterboxd at black_Cine_man for my bite-sized reviews. So
check out those bite-sized reviews, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, you can also find me over at the Cinematropolis or on all the social medias, most notably Instagram, Letterboxd, TikTok.
Ish.
I've uploaded TikToks, Laron. I don't know if I'm going to keep uploading TikToks, but I did do it. Mostly just our Instagram reviews that I didn't edit whatsoever. I just uploaded mine to TikTok just to see what would happen.
I want to say resist, but also that's what people are on. That's what people are on.
No,
so
I hate it. You tell me
how to find the people. You got to find them where they're at. Looking at you, Kamala Harris.
Yeah. People, you can find me begrudgingly on TikTok, because let me tell you, I really, really, really don't like TikTok, or do I want to be there? But the young people demand it if I want their attention. So all the channels, C Masters Talk, that's letter C Masters Talk. We have got, so coming up, a few different reviews for between now and the end of the year. You're going to catch us talking about the critically acclaimed festival darling Hamnet from writer-director Chloe Zhao next time. The week after, we are going to be here for our check-in with Big Jim. That's right. My most anticipated movie of the winter, Avatar, Fire, and Ash. I already have tickets to see it. SIFF, Seattle International Film Festival Theater, downtown, 48 frames per second, ready, locked in. And then after that, we're going to have the critically buzzed about, rarely seen, Marty Supreme, starring Timothée Chalamet, to wrap up the year before we launch into our year.
Allegedly given the performance of the year. We'll see.
Seriously, I can't wait to see. So anyway, a lot of good stuff coming in the next few weeks. But again, we'll catch you again next time.